Christmas morning had always been a bittersweet day for me. But this year, the bitterness outweighed everything else. The house was decorated impeccably, filled with the scent of pine, cinnamon, and roasted meats. Laughter echoed from the living room where my in-laws had already gathered, exchanging pleasantries and jokes as if nothing in the world could touch their joy. I had spent hours the night before helping wrap their gifts, ensuring each one was labeled and beautifully adorned, just as my mother-in-law insisted. I woke up before dawn, the pale winter light barely filtering through the curtains of our bedroom, in the suburbs of Boston. Greg was still asleep, his breathing steady and oblivious. He'd grown up with these Christmas traditions and couldn't understand why they made me so anxious. To him, his mother's perfectionism was just how she shows she cares. To me, it felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. The digital clock read 5:47 a.m. when I slipped out of bed and into the bathroom. I stared at my reflection, rehearsing the smile I'd wear all day. 7 years of marriage had taught me how to navigate the Matthews family Christmas. Stay useful, stay pleasant, stay invisible when possible. By 6:30, I was in the kitchen, prepping the breakfast casserole that Sandra, my mother-in-law, had specifically requested I make since you don't have children to attend to. The jab was so familiar, it barely stung anymore. I beat the eggs with more force than necessary, thinking about my sister Jenna and her kids in Portland, who I hadn't seen in 3 years, because Sandra always insisted Christmas be at their house. Morning, sweetheart. Greg shuffled in, kissing my cheek. Mom's already texting about when we're bringing the appetizers over. It's barely 7, and we're not due until 10, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Greg shrugged. You know how she gets on Christmas. I did know, all too well. By 9, we were loading the car with dishes and gifts. The Massachusetts air bit through my coat, bracingly cold and crisp. Our neighbor Tom waved from his driveway where he was helping his children try out new sleds. Merry Christmas, Sarah, he called. You guys heading to the in-laws again? As always, I replied with a forced cheerfulness that Greg didn't notice. The drive to Beacon Hill took just under 30 minutes. Sandra and William's brownstone stood proudly among the historic homes, adorned with tasteful white lights and a wreath that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. Greg's sister Melissa and her husband David had already arrived, their Range Rover parked in the prime spot near the entrance. There you are, Sandra said as she opened the door, her critical gaze sweeping over me. Everyone's waiting. No hug, no Merry Christmas, just the immediate reminder that somehow I was already failing. William, my father-in-law, gave me a distracted pat on the shoulder as he took the dishes from my hands. Merry Christmas, Sarah. Greg, come see what David brought. A 30-year-old Macallan. The men disappeared immediately into William's study, leaving me with Sandra and Melissa, who were already discussing the latest neighborhood gossip as if I weren't there. I busied myself arranging the gifts we'd brought under the massive Fraser fir that dominated their living room. Each ornament on the tree told a story of the Matthews family history. Vacations, achievements, inside jokes. None of which included me. Sarah. Sandra's voice cut through my thoughts. The napkins need pressing. Be a dear and take care of that while Melissa and I finish the table setting. It wasn't a request. In the laundry room, I carefully pressed each linen napkin into perfect triangles. Through the door, I could hear Sandra's voice drop to a whisper. I just don't understand what Gregory sees in her. No children after 7 years, and she can barely keep up with a proper Christmas. Melissa's response was too low to catch, but their laughter made my cheeks burn. When I returned to the dining room, carrying a stack of pristine napkins, Sandra barely glanced at them. Just put them at each place, and then check on the potatoes. I don't trust that new oven. The hours crawled by. I moved from task to task, adjusting, decorations, refilling drinks, snapping photos of the family that I wasn't invited to join. When Sandra's brother Uncle Robert arrived with his new wife Pamela, there was a flurry of introductions and champagne toasts. Pamela, at least, tried to include me in conversation, asking about my work as a graphic designer. "Oh, Sarah doesn't really work anymore," Sandra interjected before I could answer. "Just little projects here and there. Nothing serious." I bit my tongue, thinking of the branding campaign I'd just completed for a major Boston tech firm. It had paid more than Greg made in 2 months at his father's investment firm, but I'd stopped sharing my successes with the Matthews family years ago. As the time to exchange presents approached, I took my usual quiet seat in the corner, smiling softly and trying to blend in. Everyone's name was called one by one. Boxes were handed out, bows were undone, and thank yous filled the air. I waited patiently, even though a small part of me wished someone would look in my direction. But when the last gift was opened and nothing had been passed to me, a silence fell over me that no one else seemed to notice. That's when Sandra turned to me with a smirk that sent chills down my spine. "Do you really think you were getting something? You already got more than you deserve being part of this family," she said, followed by a dismissive wave. "Now get moving and wash the dishes." Her voice pierced through my chest like a blade, but I held my head high and walked toward the kitchen, in silence. Behind me, I heard Uncle Robert's awkward cough and Pamela's shocked inhale. Greg was engrossed in his new golf clubs, testing the swing in the middle of the living room. He hadn't even noticed what had just happened. In the kitchen, I gripped the edge of the marble counter, trying to steady my breathing. 7 years. 7 Christmases of increasing hostility and dismissal. I had tried so hard to be what they wanted, what Greg needed me to be. But in that moment, staring at the pile of dishes from a meal I had helped prepare, but barely been allowed to enjoy, something inside me finally cracked. As I stood over the sink, the sound of running water masked my shallow breathing. My hands trembled slightly as I scrubbed plates that had fed the very people who had treated me like an outsider. I tried to compose myself, to focus on the task and not let my emotions spill over, but my heart was heavy. I could hear their laughter from the other room, the clinking of glasses, and occasional bursts of cheer, none of it directed at me. The water ran hot over my hands, almost scalding, but I barely noticed. 7 years of Christmases, birthdays, Thanksgivings, each one worse than the last. I thought about the first time I'd met Sandra and William, how Greg had assured me they would love me. "They can be a bit traditional," he'd said, "but they're good people." Good people. I nearly laughed at the memory. The door to the kitchen swung open, and Pamela, Uncle Robert's new wife, entered hesitantly. She carried a stack of dessert plates, her expression sympathetic. "I thought you might want some help," she said, her British accent soft. I smiled thinly. "Thank you, but Sandra prefers that I handle the dishes myself. She says I'm the only one who does it right." The irony in my voice was unmistakable. Pamela set the plates down anyway and leaned against the counter. "That was quite uncomfortable out there. Are they always like that?" "Like what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "So, dismissive." She chose her word carefully. Robert didn't mention anything about family tension when he invited me. I scrubbed harder at a particularly stubborn bit of cranberry sauce. "They don't see it as tension. This is just how things are supposed to be in their world. The Matthews family and their loyal subjects." Pamela laughed, then quickly covered her mouth. "Sorry, it's not funny. I can relate. My ex-husband's family was similar. Always made me feel like I should be grateful they allowed me to marry into their precious bloodline. For the first time that day, I felt a genuine connection with someone." "What happened?" "I left him after 5 years. Best decision I ever made." She smiled, the confidence in her eyes momentarily igniting something in me. "Robert's different. His family, well, this side at least, clearly has issues, but he stands up for me." The door swung open again, and Sandra appeared, her eyes narrowing at the sight of Pamela. "There you are," she said sharply. "Robert's been looking for you. Sarah can manage on her own. She's used to it." The implication was clear. Go back, where you belong. After Pamela left with an apologetic glance, Sandra lingered, inspecting my work. "Make sure you dry the crystal properly this time. Last year you left water spots." I nodded silently, continuing to wash. She stood there, watching me, and I could feel the weight of her judgment pressing down on my shoulders. "You know," she said after a moment, her voice falsely casual, "Gregory was supposed to marry Jennifer Harrington. Her father and William were college roommates. She's a pediatrician now, with 2 beautiful children." She sighed dramatically. "But then he met you at that ridiculous art show and threw away everything we had planned for him." I had tolerated years of subtle cruelty, of being made to feel like an uninvited guest in my own marriage. I had smiled through backhanded compliments, cooked for their gatherings, and volunteered to help whenever they needed something done. But this open humiliation on Christmas of all days, was something I couldn't silently endure any longer. I set down the plate I was washing and turned to face her. "Is there something specific you want from me, Sandra? Some reaction you're hoping to provoke?" Her eyebrows shot up, unused to me speaking back. "I'm simply making conversation." "No, you're not," I said quietly. "You're trying to hurt me. You've been trying to hurt me for 7 years, and I've never understood why." Sandra's face flushed. "Don't be dramatic. If you feel unwelcome, perhaps it's because you've never made an effort to truly be part of this family. Always working on your little drawings instead of focusing on giving Gregory children. Always so quiet at family gatherings, judging us." "Judging you?" I almost laughed. "I've spent 7 years trying to please you. I've changed how I dress, how I speak. What? I cook. I gave up spending holidays with my own family. I've bent over backward trying to be enough for you. And yet," she said coldly, "you're still not." The words hung in the air between us. My dignity, which I had been sacrificing in small pieces, over the years, finally cried out for air. "You're right," I said, surprising us both. "I'm not enough for you, and I never will be." With deliberate calm, I dried my hands, took off the apron I had been wearing, and walked past her. The family was gathered in the living room, Greg and his father deep in conversation about stocks, Melissa showing off her new diamond bracelet to Pamela. No one looked up as I crossed to the front hall closet and retrieved my coat. Greg finally noticed as I slipped it on. "Sarah, what are you doing?" "I'm leaving," I said simply. He laughed nervously, glancing at his family. "Don't be silly. We haven't had dessert yet." "I'm not being silly, Greg. I'm being serious." My voice was steady, surprising even myself. "I can't do this anymore." The room fell silent. William cleared his throat awkwardly. Melissa studied her nails. Uncle Robert looked genuinely concerned. Greg came to me, speaking in a hushed tone. "What's going on? If Mom said something to upset you..." "It's not just today, Greg. It's every day. It's 7 years of being treated like I'm worthless, and you never once standing up for me." I buttoned my coat with fingers that no longer trembled. "Do you even notice what happens in this house? How they speak to me? How they treat me?" His expression showed genuine confusion, which somehow hurt worse than if he'd been deliberately ignoring it. He truly didn't see it. "Let's talk about this at home," he whispered, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. "I won't be going home with you tonight." Sandra appeared from the kitchen, her face a mask of indignation. "Gregory, control your wife. This behavior is entirely inappropriate." And there it was, the final push I needed. I looked at Greg, waiting for him to say something, anything to defend me. His eyes darted between his mother and me, trapped in an impossible choice he'd never prepared for. "Sarah, please," he said finally. Don't make a scene." Those 5 words told me everything I needed to know. I didn't yell. I didn't slam anything. I simply opened the door, stepped out into the cold, and closed it gently behind me. That's when I heard Sandra's voice, smug and taunting behind me. "You'll be back," she sneered. But what she didn't realize was, I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving them. I made it halfway down the front steps before Greg came after me, his face flushed with confusion and embarrassment. "Sarah, stop. You can't just walk out on Christmas." I turned to face him, the cold air biting at my cheeks, snow beginning to fall around us. The holiday lights from neighboring houses cast colorful shadows across his bewildered face. "I'm done. Greg, I've been disappearing in that house for years, and you've never even noticed. What are you talking about? My family loves you." The delusion in his statement was almost painful to hear. "No, Greg, they don't. And the worst part is, I don't think you do either. Not really. You love the idea of me, the wife who fits into your family's plan without disrupting anything. But that's not who I am." He reached for me again, desperation in his eyes. "Come back inside. We'll talk about this tomorrow." I shook my head, stepping back. "There's nothing left to talk about. I've spent 7 years talking, and no one has been listening." The air outside was crisp, and snowflakes had begun to fall, catching the streetlights in delicate glimmers. As I walked down the street, I didn't feel sadness or regret. I felt clarity. I walked without looking back, heading straight to the small apartment I had kept in my name before marrying, an old habit of mine, holding onto a safety net just in case. Boston looked different on Christmas Day. The streets of Beacon Hill were nearly empty, with everyone tucked away in their warm homes celebrating with loved ones. As I made my way toward the T station, I passed brightly lit windows showcasing families gathered around trees and tables. In one brownstone, a young girl was twirling in what looked like a new dress, her parents clapping and laughing. The scene didn't bring me pain as I expected. Instead, I felt a strange lightness. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Greg, of course. I silenced it without looking. The subway was running on a holiday schedule, nearly deserted except for a few workers, heading to or from shifts. An older man in hospital scrubs nodded at me as I took a seat. We were both outsiders today, away from the prescribed Christmas joy. "Rough holiday?" he asked, his accent distinctly South Boston. I managed a small smile. "Just unexpected." He nodded as if he understood completely. "Sometimes the unexpected turns out to be a gift," he said, then returned to his book. I rode the Green Line to Park Street, transferred to the Red Line, and finally emerged in Cambridge, the cold air hitting me anew. The walk to my apartment took 15 minutes, my dress shoes slipping occasionally on patches of ice. I hadn't dressed for a winter trek when I'd gotten ready that morning. Another lifetime ago, it seemed. The small 2-bedroom apartment on Trowbridge Street had been my home throughout grad school. When Greg and I got engaged, my sister Jenna thought I was crazy for not selling it. "What's the point of keeping it?" she'd asked over the phone. "It's not like you're going to need it, and the Boston market is hot." I couldn't explain it then. The nagging feeling that I might someday need a place that was entirely mine. Instead, I'd told her it was a good investment, that I could rent it out someday. But I never did. For 7 years, I'd paid the mortgage on an empty apartment while living in the house Greg had bought in Newton, the one his parents had helped select. I'd visited occasionally, telling Greg I needed to check on things, air it out. He never questioned it, never asked to come along. My key still worked. I flipped the light switch, and the apartment greeted me with shadows and silence. The furniture was draped with white sheets, ghostly shapes in the dim light. I pulled them off one by one, revealing the simple IKEA couch, the dining table I'd found at a yard sale in Somerville, the bookshelves sagging with art books and novels. I turned up the thermostat, listening to the old radiators clank and hiss as they came to life. Opening the fridge revealed nothing but a box of baking soda and a bottle of wine I'd forgotten. The cabinets held a few cans of soup, some pasta, tea bags, emergency supplies I'd left just in case. The just in case had finally arrived. I changed out of my Christmas dress into old jeans and a sweatshirt I found in the bedroom drawer. They smelled musty but felt like armor compared to the outfit Sandra had subtly critiqued that morning. I made a cup of tea and sat on the couch, watching the snow fall outside my window. My phone had been buzzing intermittently. I finally checked it to find 17 missed calls and a flurry of texts. Greg. Where are you? Come back, we can talk about this. Greg. Sarah, please answer. Mom's upset. Greg. This isn't funny anymore. Everyone's worried. Melissa. Hey, Greg's freaking out. Whatever Mom said, just ignore it like usual. Greg. I'm driving around looking for you. Where would you go on Christmas? The last one made me laugh bitterly. 7 years together, and he had no idea where I would go. He didn't know about this apartment, not really. I'd mentioned it in passing, when we first met, but he'd never shown interest in this part of my life. The independent woman who'd put herself through grad school, who'd built a career before meeting him. I typed a single response. I'm safe. Don't look for me. I need space. Then I silenced the phone again and placed it face down on the coffee table. That night, I sat alone on the worn-out couch, sipping tea and letting the silence wrap around me like a warm blanket. I didn't answer my phone, though it buzzed several times. I needed to feel my own presence again, to reconnect with the woman I had been before I became their invisible servant. I hadn't realized just how lost I had become, inside that house of mirrors, constantly reflecting others' expectations. I found an old sketch pad in my desk drawer and began to draw, something I hadn't done in months. Sandra had always referred to my art as a hobby in that dismissive tone, suggesting it was something to be outgrown. Greg had gradually adopted the same attitude, asking when I was going to get serious about our future. My pencil moved across the paper, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. I sketched the view from my window, the snow-covered street, the old Victorian houses opposite, a cat peering from a neighbor's windowsill. Around midnight, I checked my email out of habit and found a message from my biggest client, asking if I could tackle a new project in January. I smiled, realizing I'd never have to run this opportunity by Sandra, never have to downplay my success to avoid making Greg feel insecure about his own career at his father's firm. I slept more peacefully that night than I had in years. There were no footsteps above me, no sharp-tongued remarks echoing down the stairs. Just quiet, and the comforting knowledge that I had finally taken a stand. For the first time in a long while, I chose me. Morning came with tentative sunlight filtering through blinds I'd forgotten to close. For a moment, I was disoriented, expecting to wake to the sound of Greg's shower running, to the knowledge that I needed to be downstairs before Sandra called to discuss the disaster that was Christmas dinner. Instead, I woke to the sound of a neighbor scraping ice off their car, to the distant hum of the city coming to life after the holiday. I made coffee with the old grounds I found in the freezer, grimacing at the staleness, but savoring the ritual of moving around my own kitchen at my own pace. The phone I'd abandoned on the coffee table showed 34 missed calls, most from Greg, several from his parents' house, 2 from Melissa. I scrolled through without listening to the voicemails, then noticed a text from Jenna. Jenna, Merry Christmas. Hope the Matthews family circus wasn't too unbearable this year. Call when you can. Miss you. My sister had always seen through the facade of my marriage. During her last visit 3 years ago, she'd pulled me aside after dinner. Are you happy, Sarah? Really happy? She'd asked, concern etched in her face. I'd deflected with a laugh. Of course, why wouldn't I be? I have everything. She hadn't pushed, but her eyes told me she wasn't convinced. Now I texted her back. Me. Can I call you? Something happened. Her response was immediate. Of course. Everything okay? I curled up on the window seat and called her. When she answered, the sound of my niece and nephew shouting in the background made me smile. Sarah, hold on. Let me go somewhere quieter. There was rustling, a door closing, and then her voice came through, clearly. What's up? You never call on Boxing Day. And so I told her everything. The years of subtle cruelty, the Christmas disaster, walking out. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, the silence stretched between us. I wish you'd said something sooner, she finally said. But I'm glad you left. You are? I hadn't expected that. I'd half anticipated a lecture about working through marriage problems, about not giving up. God, yes. That woman has been emotionally abusing you for years, and Greg has been letting it happen. I've been worried about you. Hearing someone else name it, abuse, made my throat tighten. I don't know what happens next, I admitted. You don't have to know right now, she said gently. Just take some time to remember who you are without them telling you who to be. After we hung up, I made a simple breakfast and sat by the window watching Cambridge come to life. A young couple walked hand in hand through the snow. An old woman carefully navigated the sidewalk with a cane. A man with a large dog bounded energetically down the street. Life continuing, ordinary, and beautiful. My phone buzzed again. Greg, this time I answered. Where are you? His voice was strained, desperate. Somewhere I needed to be, I replied. Sarah, please, come home. We can work this out. Can we? I asked quietly. Can you tell me what we'd be working out? Do you even understand why I left? His hesitation told me everything. Mom was rude to you. I get it. But walking out on Christmas... It wasn't just Christmas, Greg. It's been every day for 7 years, and you've never once stood up for me. That's not fair, he protested. My mother can be difficult, but she means well. And I always support you. When? I challenged. Name one time you took my side against your family. The silence that followed confirmed what I already knew. He couldn't remember because it had never happened. I love you, he said finally, his voice small. I know you think you do, I replied. But love should make you brave, Greg. It should make you stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. After we hung up, I felt no urge to cry. Instead, I found myself looking around the apartment, seeing possibilities I hadn't considered in years. The second bedroom could become a studio again. The living room needed new curtains. The kitchen desperately required updating. For the first time in years, I was thinking only of what I wanted, what I needed. Not what would please Sandra, or what Greg might prefer, or what the Matthews family would approve of. Just me, Sarah Donovan, finding my way back to myself one quiet moment at a time. The next morning, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Dozens of messages and missed calls. My husband's name, my sister-in-law, even my mother-in-law. I ignored them all until one message caught my eye. We need you. Please come back. She collapsed. My stomach tightened. I called back and learned that my mother-in-law had fainted at home. Apparently, in her rage and agitation after I left, she began shouting at everyone, blaming them for not stopping me. Her blood pressure spiked, and she passed out before the paramedics arrived. I wasn't surprised by her reaction. She had always believed she controlled the narrative. My absence had disrupted her illusion. It was Melissa who answered when I finally called. Thank God, she breathed. Where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for hours. I needed space, I said simply. What happened? Mom went ballistic after you left. Started screaming about how you'd embarrassed the family, how Greg needed to control you better. Melissa's voice was tight. Then she just dropped. Right. In the middle of the living room, Dad called 911. "Is she okay?" I asked, surprised to find I actually cared. "They're running tests. They think it was her blood pressure, maybe a small stroke. Dad's with her now. Greg's a mess." I closed my eyes, absorbing the news. "Which hospital?" "Mass General. Sarah." Melissa paused. "I'm sorry about yesterday. What Mom said to you. It wasn't right." The apology caught me off guard. Melissa had always been Sandra's echo, reinforcing her mother's opinions, laughing at her cutting remarks. "Thanks," I managed. "Will you come? Greg needs you." There it was. Not, "we were wrong," or "you deserve better." Just another demand dressed as a request. Greg needed me. What about what I needed? "I'll think about it," I said, ending the call before she could press further. I moved through my apartment in a daze, making coffee I didn't drink, straightening pillows that didn't need straightening. Part of me, the part 7 years of Matthew's conditioning had created, felt guilty. I should rush to the hospital, be the supportive wife, play my assigned role. But another part, the part that had walked away yesterday, recognized this for what it was. Another manipulation. Still, I couldn't shake the image of Sandra collapsed on her perfect Beacon Hill floor, surrounded by discarded wrapping paper and half-empty champagne flutes. Had I caused this? The rational part of me knew better. Sandra's health was her responsibility. Her reaction to not getting her way was her own. My phone rang again. Greg this time. "Sarah, please," he said without preamble. "Mom's asking for you." "She's asking for me?" I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. "Well, no," he admitted. "But she keeps talking about you. The doctors say she's agitated and it's not good for her recovery. So this is my fault?" The old pattern reasserting itself. "I didn't say that," Greg protested. "Look, I know yesterday was awful. Mom was out of line. But she's sick, Sarah. Whatever issues we have, this is bigger." I sat on my window seat, watching a cardinal land on a snow-covered branch outside. "What did you say to her? After I left?" His silence told me everything. "You didn't say anything, did you? You let her rant and rave about me, never once defending me." "It wasn't like that," he insisted. "Everything happened so fast. She got upset, then she collapsed. And before that? What about the 7 years before that, Greg? When? Did you ever stand up for me?" He sighed, a sound so familiar it made my chest ache. "Can we not do this now? My mother is in the hospital." "Of course," I said quietly. "Your mother comes first. She always has." After hanging up, I wrapped myself in a blanket and stared out, at the Cambridge Street. The snowfall had stopped, leaving everything pristine and quiet. A group of children trudged past with sleds, heading for the small hill in the nearby park. Their laughter floated up to my window, carefree and infectious. I thought about Sandra lying in a hospital bed, imperious even in illness. I thought about Greg, caught between his mother and his wife, unable to choose. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to earn a place in a family that had decided long ago I didn't belong. Still, I didn't rush to the hospital. I knew what this was. Fear, not of losing me, but of losing control over the situation. I took my time, reflecting deeply on how they had treated me for years, and how suddenly my existence seemed to matter, only when it disrupted their comfort. Around noon, I showered and dressed in clothes I'd left behind. Jeans, a sweater, boots that hadn't been approved by Sandra's discriminating eye. I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. There was color in my cheeks, a clarity in my eyes that had been missing for years. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Pamela, Robert's wife. Just wanted to check if you're okay. What happened yesterday was awful. No pressure to respond." The simple kindness brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I wrote back, "I'm okay, taking some time for myself." Her response came quickly. "Good for you. From one survivor to another, it gets better." Survivor. The word resonated somewhere deep inside me. Was that what I was? Had I survived something? The question followed me as I finally left my apartment and made my way to the T station. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and flowers. I followed the directions to Sandra's room, my steps slowing as I approached. Through the partially open door, I could see William sitting by the bed, his normally commanding presence diminished. Greg paced near the window, running his hand through his hair, a nervous habit from childhood. I hesitated, my hand on the doorframe. I could still turn around, walk away, protect the fragile peace I'd found. No one had seen me yet. But then Greg looked up. His face registered shock, then relief, then uncertainty. "Sarah?" I stepped into the room. William turned, his expression unreadable. And there was Sandra, smaller somehow against the white hospital sheets, monitoring equipment beeping steadily beside her. "You came," Greg said, moving toward me but stopping short of touching me. "Not for the reasons you think," I said quietly. William stood, clearing his throat awkwardly. "I'll get some coffee," he muttered, slipping past me into the hallway. Sandra's eyes fluttered open, focusing with effort. When she saw me, something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps. Or disappointment that her collapse hadn't immediately brought me back into line. "The doctors say it was a transient ischemic attack. A mini-stroke," Greg explained unnecessarily. "They want to keep her for observation, run some more tests." I nodded, taking in the scene. The mighty Sandra Matthews, felled by her own rage. There was no satisfaction in seeing her weakened, only a profound sadness for all the years wasted on animosity. "You shouldn't have come," Sandra said finally, her voice hoarse but still sharp. Greg looked stricken. "Mom, please." "No," I interrupted. "Let her speak." Sandra's eyes narrowed. "You think this changes anything? That I'll suddenly welcome you with open arms because you deigned to visit me in the hospital?" "Actually," I said, "I came to see for myself that you were okay. Not because I owe you anything, but because it was the right thing to do. The kind thing." Something shifted in her gaze. Confusion, perhaps. Kindness had never been part of our relationship's vocabulary. "And now that I've seen you're in good hands," I continued, "I'll be going." "That's it?" Greg asked, disbelief in his voice. "You're just leaving again?" I looked at him, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time in years. The boy I'd fallen in love with was still there somewhere, beneath layers of his mother's expectations and his father's ambitions. "Yes, Greg, I am. Not out of spite or anger, but because I need to. For me." As I turned to leave, Sandra called after me, her voice surprisingly vulnerable. "He'll never choose you over family. You know that, don't you?" I paused in the doorway, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "That's the thing, Sandra. He shouldn't have to choose. A real family would have made room for me. You never did." 2 days later, I finally returned, but not to their home. I went to the hospital where she was recovering. She looked frail in the bed, surrounded by flowers and whispers. When she saw me, her face changed from pride to panic. She tried to speak, but I calmly raised my hand. I wasn't there for revenge. I wasn't there for reconciliation. I was there to be seen, as a woman who had finally reclaimed her worth. The snow had started again as I made my way across Boston, fat flakes drifting lazily from a steel gray sky. I'd spent the previous day in my apartment, sketching designs for a new client project and fielding concerned texts from Jenna. She'd offered to fly in from Portland, but I assured her I was okay. Better than okay, actually. The knot that had lived in my stomach for 7 years was slowly unraveling. The hospital lobby was busy with post-holiday visitors. I checked in at the desk, half expecting to be told that the Matthews family had restricted access to Sandra's room. But the volunteer simply smiled and directed me to the 4th floor. As the elevator climbed, I rehearsed what I would say. Not an apology. I had nothing to apologize for. Not accusations. Those would only reinforce Sandra's narrative of me as the villain. I needed something else. Something honest but not cruel. The elevator doors opened, and I nearly collided with William. He stepped back, his expression cycling through surprise, wariness, and something that might have been shame. "Sarah," he said, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "I was just getting coffee." "How is she?" I asked, genuinely curious. He sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 67 years. "Physically, better. The doctors say there's no permanent damage. It was a warning, not a tragedy." He hesitated. "Otherwise? She's Sandra." I nodded, understanding completely. "She's not an easy woman," William said unexpectedly. "Never has been, but she loves Greg in her way." "I know," I replied softly. "That's never been the problem." He studied me, seeing perhaps for the first time the woman his son had married, not the outsider who had disrupted his family's plans. "The room's just down the hall. Greg's with her now." I thanked him and continued, my heart rate steadying with each step. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about me finding closure. The door to Sandra's room was open. I could hear her voice, irritable despite its weakness, critiquing the hospital's food. Greg stood by the window, shoulders hunched in that familiar posture of resignation. Melissa sat in a chair near the bed, scrolling through her phone. Pamela and Robert were nowhere to be seen, probably escaped to the cafeteria for a reprieve. I knocked softly on the door frame. 3 heads turned in unison. "Sarah," Greg breathed, relief washing over his face. "You came back." "Just to visit," I clarified, stepping into the room. Melissa shot me a look that mixed frustration and gratitude. "I'll leave you guys to talk," she said, gathering her purse and slipping past me. I moved to the foot of Sandra's bed. She looked different. Smaller, less imposing in the hospital gown with her carefully styled hair now flat against the pillow. Her makeup had been washed away, revealing age spots and wrinkles she normally concealed. But her eyes, those were unchanged, sharp and assessing. "So," she said, trying for her usual imperious tone but not quite succeeding. "You've decided to stop being childish." And there it was, the same dismissal, the same refusal to see me as an adult with valid feelings. Once, it would have stung. Now, it simply confirmed what I already knew. "Actually," I said calmly, "I've decided to be honest. With you, with Greg, and most importantly, with myself." Greg moved toward me, his face hopeful. "Sarah, I'm so glad you're here. We can work through this. I know we can." I turned to him, keeping my voice gentle. "Greg, I'm not here to reconcile. I'm here because, despite everything, I care about your mother's health. But nothing has changed." "What do you mean?" Panic edged into his voice. "I mean I'm not coming back to our house. I'm not resuming our life as if nothing happened." Sandra made a scoffing sound. "Of course you are. What else would you do? Where would you go?" I smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt completely genuine. "I have my own place, my own career, my own life. I never needed you, Sandra. You just made me believe I did." She blinked, genuinely startled. "Your own place? What are you talking about?" Greg looked equally confused. "Sarah, what?" "The apartment in Cambridge," I explained. "The one I kept when we got married. I never sold it." Understanding dawned on Greg's face. "That's where you've been? All this time you had somewhere else to go?" I nodded. "I tried to tell you about it years ago, but you weren't interested. Just like you weren't interested when I told you how your mother treated me, or when I asked you to spend Christmas with my family for once." The family watched me in stunned silence. My husband tried to hold my hand, but I gently pulled away. I had made arrangements to stay in my apartment for a while. I needed space, not just physical but emotional. I wasn't going to be a part of a family that only valued me when I was silent and compliant. "This is ridiculous," Sandra said finally, her voice weaker but still sharp. "Greg, tell her to stop this nonsense." I raised an eyebrow. "See? That's exactly the problem. 7 years, and you still think Greg can tell me what to do, as if I'm a child or a pet." "You're my wife," Greg said, wounded. "We're supposed to work through problems together." "Are we? Because I've been telling you about this problem for years, and you've never once taken it seriously." Sandra shifted uncomfortably in her bed. "I've always treated you fairly. I welcomed you into this family." "No," I interrupted quietly. "You tolerated me. There's a difference." The door opened, and a nurse entered to check Sandra's vitals. She glanced around, sensing the tension. "Everything okay in here?" "Fine," I assured her with a smile. The nurse went about her work, creating a brief respite from the confrontation. I used the moment to center myself, to remember what I'd come here to say. When the nurse left, I addressed Sandra directly. "I didn't come here to argue or to hurt you. I came because despite everything, I wanted to see for myself that you were recovering." "How generous," she muttered. "And," I continued as if she hadn't spoken, "I wanted to tell you in person that I'm filing for separation from Greg." Greg made a strangled sound. "Sarah, no, please." "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I said gently. "I'm not doing this to punish you, Greg. I'm doing it because I deserve better than to be an afterthought in my own marriage." Sandra's monitor beeped as her heart rate increased. "This is what you came here for? To upset a sick woman? To break my son's heart?" I met her gaze steadily. "I came here to be honest. Something this family has never been with me." Before I left, I looked my mother-in-law in the eyes. She didn't speak. Her silence said enough. She finally understood that I wasn't the weak, grateful woman she thought she could control. I had walked away, and unlike what she'd predicted, I wasn't coming back to beg. I came back standing taller than I ever had. "I wish you a full recovery, Sandra," I said sincerely. "And I hope someday you understand that what happened between us didn't have to be this way." I turned to Greg, whose face was a mask of disbelief and grief. "I'll be in touch about arrangements for collecting my things." "Don't do this," he pleaded. "I love you." "I know you think you do," I replied softly. "But real love wouldn't have let me feel alone for 7 years. As I walked toward the door, William appeared in the entrance, 2 coffee cups in hand. He looked between us, reading the situation instantly. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question. I nodded. "Goodbye, William." He surprised me by stepping aside, offering me a clear path out. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think I understand what you're doing." Coming from William Matthews, it was practically a blessing. I gave him a small smile and continued, down the hallway. In the elevator, I pressed the button for the lobby and watched the doors close on the chapter of my life I was finally ending. My reflection in the polished metal showed a woman I was beginning to recognize again. Chin up, shoulders back, eyes clear and focused. The freedom I'd felt walking away on Christmas Day wasn't a temporary high. It was the beginning of a new understanding. I wasn't trapped. I never had been. I had stayed in a situation that diminished me because I'd been willing to trade my self-worth for acceptance that never came. As I stepped out into the snowy afternoon, I took a deep breath of cold, clean air. Behind me was a family that had never truly been mine. Ahead was uncertainty, challenge, and for the first time in too long, hope. Weeks passed, and the house I had once dreaded became a distant memory. I returned to work, reconnected with old friends, and found solace in my solitude. My husband reached out occasionally, trying to fix what was broken, but I needed him to understand that love without respect is hollow. And until he stood up for me the way I once stood for us, I couldn't come back. January in Cambridge brought bitter cold and early sunsets. My apartment slowly transformed from a neglected space into a true home. I bought new bedding, hung artwork I'd kept in storage, and filled the refrigerator with food I actually wanted to eat, not what Sandra deemed appropriate for a Matthews family meal. My design business flourished unexpectedly. Without the pressure to downplay my success, I took on projects I'd previously declined. A branding campaign for a women's shelter, illustrations for a children's book about standing up to bullies. The irony wasn't lost on me. One evening, as snow fell silently outside my window, I received an email from my lawyer, Catherine Rodriguez. Greg had finally responded to the separation paperwork. He wasn't contesting anything, which surprised me. I had expected resistance, perhaps even manipulation, accusations that I was being hasty or unreasonable. Instead, he had simply signed. I called Jenna to share the news. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice gentle against the background noise of her busy Portland household. I considered the question carefully. Relieved? Sad? Free? I paused. "Is it strange that I can feel all those things at once?" "Not at all," she assured me. "You're grieving, Sarah. Not just the end of your marriage, but the relationship you deserved and never got." Her words resonated deep within me. I keep waiting to regret leaving, but I don't. Is that cold? "It's healing," she said firmly. "When are you coming to visit?" The kids miss their aunt. The invitation warmed me. For years, Sandra had monopolized our holidays, making it nearly impossible to see my own family. Now, I could go wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted. "How about February? Break?" I suggested. "I could work remotely from Portland for a week." "Perfect. We'll take the kids skiing at Mount Hood. Do you still have all your gear?" I laughed. Somewhere. Probably buried under 7 years of country club attire and sensible pumps. After we hung up, I looked around my cozy living room, now bathed in the soft glow of the lamp I'd rescued from a thrift store in Somerville, an Art Deco piece Sandra would have sneered at. I felt something unfamiliar. Contentment. The next morning, I bundled up against the cold and walked to my favorite coffee shop on Massachusetts Avenue. The barista, Zach, greeted me by name, a small pleasure I'd forgotten existed. "The usual?" he asked, already reaching for a mug. "Please," I smiled, settling at a table near the window. As I opened my laptop to check emails, a shadow fell across my table. I looked up to find Pamela, Uncle Robert's wife, standing uncertainly before me. "Sarah? I thought that was you." "Pamela," I said, genuinely pleased. "Please, join me." She sat, unwinding a colorful scarf from around her neck. "I wasn't sure you'd want company, especially from the enemy camp?" I suggested with a small smile. She laughed. "Something like that." "You're hardly the enemy. You were the only one who noticed what was happening at Christmas." Zach delivered my coffee, and Pamela ordered a chai tea. We sat in companionable silence for a moment. "How are you?" she finally asked. "Really?" "I'm good," I said, surprised, to realize it was true. "Better than I've been in a long time. How's everyone?" Pamela sighed. "Sandra's recovered physically, but she's on a rampage. The separation papers sent her into a tailspin. She's convinced you'll come crawling back once you realize what you've lost." I couldn't help but laugh. That sounds like Sandra. "Greg's not doing so well," she added carefully. "He looks lost without you." A pang of sadness struck me, but not regret. He always had a choice, Pamela. He could have stood up to her. He never did. She nodded, understanding. "Robert and I are keeping our distance. He says the Matthews family drama has gone nuclear, and we're better off watching from afar." "Smart man," I commented. "He is," she agreed, pride evident in her voice. "That's why he left England when his own family became toxic. Sometimes distance is the only solution." We chatted for nearly an hour, discovering shared interests in art and literature that had never surfaced during formal Matthews family gatherings. As we parted, she hesitated. "Sarah, I should tell you. Greg's been asking about you. Where you're living, if you're seeing anyone." My guard went up immediately. "Please don't tell him." "I haven't," she assured me. "But he seems different. Quieter. I think he's finally realizing what happened." I nodded, appreciating her honesty, but unwilling to let hope creep in. "Thank you for telling me, and for the company." Days turned into weeks. I developed a routine that revolved entirely around my own needs and desires. Morning yoga, client, meetings, evening walks along the Charles River. I reconnected with friends from grad school, people I'd gradually let slip away during my marriage as Sandra deemed them unsuitable. We met for dinners at small ethnic restaurants Greg would have complained about, attended poetry readings that Sandra would have mocked. One Saturday, I was browsing in a bookstore near Harvard Square when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Is this Sarah Donovan?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, this is she." "My name is Dr. Eleanor Winters. I'm Sandra Matthews' therapist." I nearly dropped the book I was holding. "Her what?" "Her therapist," the voice repeated calmly. "She's given me permission to contact you." I found a quiet corner of the bookstore. "I'm sorry, but Sandra Matthews is seeing a therapist. Voluntarily?" Dr. Winters chuckled softly. "Yes, though I'll admit it wasn't entirely her idea. Her doctor strongly recommended it after her TIA to help manage stress." "I see," I said, still processing this information. "Why are you calling me?" "Sandra has been working through some difficult realizations in our sessions. She's expressed interest in speaking with you in a mediated environment." I felt my defenses rise. "If this is some manipulation tactic..." "It's not," Dr. Winters assured me. "This would be a controlled conversation with me present. Sandra would not be permitted to attack or blame you. The purpose would be for her to take responsibility for her behavior." I sat down heavily on a nearby chair. I'm having trouble imagining Sandra Matthews taking responsibility for anything. "People can surprise us, Mrs. Donovan, especially when faced with their own mortality." "I need to think about this," I said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need." After we hung up, I wandered through the bookstore in a daze, eventually purchasing a novel I wasn't sure I'd actually read. Sandra in therapy. Sandra wanting to apologize. It seemed as improbable as snow in July. That evening, I called Jenna for advice. "It's a trap," she said immediately. "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But what if it's not? What if she's genuinely trying to change?" Jenna sighed. "Do you want reconciliation with these people after everything they put you through?" I considered the question. "Not reconciliation exactly, but closure? A chance to be heard finally? Then do it on your terms. Meet somewhere public. Have someone waiting nearby. and be prepared to walk away again if it goes south. What surprised me most was how light I felt. I had feared walking away would break me, but instead, it rebuilt me. I started therapy, began writing again, and even traveled alone for the first time in years. I had tasted something too precious to let go. Freedom. After much consideration, I texted Dr. Winters that I would meet with Sandra, but not yet. I needed more time to strengthen my own foundation, to be certain of who I was and what I wanted before facing the woman who had tried so hard to erase me. February came, bringing with it a week in Portland with Jenna and her family. We spent days on Mount Hood, teaching my niece and nephew to ski, and evenings by the fireplace, talking until the early hours. On my last night there, Jenna handed me a small package. "What's this?" I asked, unwrapping it to find a delicate silver pendant. "It's a phoenix," she explained, "rising from the ashes. It reminded me of you." Tears pricked my eyes as I fastened it around my neck. "Thank you." When I returned to Cambridge, there was a letter waiting in my mailbox. I recognized Greg's handwriting immediately. For a moment, I considered returning it unopened, but curiosity won out. Inside was not a plea for reconciliation as I'd feared, but something more surprising. An apology. A real one. Acknowledging specific instances when he had failed to support me, times he had chosen his mother's approval over my happiness. He didn't ask me to come back. He simply wanted me to know that he understood, finally, what he had lost and why. I sat on my window seat, holding the letter, watching the last light of day fade over Cambridge. There was a time when these words would have been all I needed to rush back into his arms. Now, they were simply words on paper. Important, yes, but not life-changing. And while they may still sit around that grand Christmas table, surrounded by gifts and empty cheer, I sit by my own modest tree, knowing that the greatest gift I ever received was the strength to walk away and never look back. Because in walking away, I found something I'd forgotten existed, myself. Not the shadow version that had survived in the Matthews household, but the full, vibrant woman who had dreams and boundaries and the courage to protect both. I found peace, not in someone else's approval, but in my own company. And that, I discovered, was worth everything I'd left behind, and more than enough to build a future on.